It's your girl Kat from the You Grow Gurl Podcast, and I am back with another episode. But this episode specifically is really around, me raising two just simply incredible boys. And today I want to really jump into a conversation around raising, an athlete in my son Carter, and then also about Chase. But more importantly, I really wanted this episode to really focus on my son Carter, and just how important and special and amazing young man that he is. I could go on and on because he's my son. But to know him is to love him. Um, his father and I are just truly blessed by the things that he has been able to accomplish in his, short life. And so, a lot of times I'm asked, my God, a ton of questions. It's almost crazy the amount of questions that my husband and I get, about Carter. And we've been getting questions, about our son since he was just a little boy. So today, you're going to get mama's perspective. But then, I plan on doing another episode where you will be able to talk or listen, excuse me, to, his dad and I kind of talk through, how we have both dealt with, raising a young man and also an athlete, and then also give you guys the opportunity to experience Carter yourself. So we'll hopefully get him on the podcast and share some of his own things that he's experiencing because it's his gift. And so I think part of why I decided to do an episode, built around my son is because I want people to really understand, you know, the background in which Carter comes from, the foundation that his father and I have set for him, and also the things that we have done to help him, get to some of the places and things that he's been able to accomplish, but also knowing and sharing that, this is Carter's gift. Okay. This is what God has made him to be. Although God chose us to be his parents, he already knew Carter's assignment. And so he gave him all these gifts, talents, and abilities to be the best Carter Hadnot that he can be. But he also instilled in his father and I some gifts and things that we can do in terms of allowing him to get there and creating and helping him with this roadmap so he can live out his dream. And so, some people may agree with some of the things that we have done as parents, and some may say, no, I may not necessarily agree, but, I think that's what makes this world so beautiful is that we can agree to disagree on how we raise our children, and the things that we, provide and give to them in order for them to be successful in whatever it is that they want to do. And so, I want to talk a little bit about, from a young age, Carter we allowed him to play all kind of sports as we did with our other children, our two oldest children, who are adults now. But, we gave them opportunities to be able to do whatever it is that they would, their hearts desired to do or whatever that was they wanted to do. With Carter played soccer. He played obviously football, he played basketball, and then he obviously picked up a baseball bat. We wanted him to figure out what it is that he really wanted to do. We are an athlete family. My husband and I have both backgrounds, not professionally, but we both were athletes, throughout our life, all the way through high school. Um, and we put our all into being the best athletes that we can be. We learned a lot during that journey, the importance of teamwork and what that looks like, and the importance of working together, which has also been helpful in our lives and our careers along the way. And I think that that's a lot of what sports does. It molds your character. It teaches you about working together and that teamwork aspect of things. And, to us, that was important for our son. And so, with that being said, he loved football. He played locally for Rialto Pop Warner, where he met great friends, and we have lifelong friends from that relationship and have a lot of support, and had a lot of support from those folks. And so that was a really, really good time. But his hand was always on, wrapped around a baseball bat. From the moment that he was 1 years old, 2 years old. I remember, I think it was his second birthday actually. A friend of ours bought him an LA Dodger hat. And I always look at that hat, and actually, I still have that LA Dodger hat 17 or 16, 15 years later, from when that person bought it, because I'm just a mama that holds on to everything, just like I'm sure a lot of other mamas do too. So, but I hold on to everything that, we treasure every little thing that our children do. And so I hold on to a lot of the things that Carter has done. So, um, basically held a baseball bat, at the age of 2.5, he was already playing, and, he already had the family out there watching him play. And, we just really enjoyed watching him run around the bases. I remember my stepdad Vince, saying, "Oh my God, he's passing up the bases. He's running around the pitcher's diamond. He's gonna be so good." And and I'm like, but he's literally running in the pitcher's mound, all in the way. But that was Carter. It was, I can't sit still. Let me be where I need to be, whether that be any position. And so, if I look back in hindsight, it's almost like a utility player, because put me anywhere, coach, and I can play. And so that's what he showed us at a very young age, that it didn't matter if you put me on first base. I can be a pitcher, I can be a shortstop, I can be a second baseman, a third baseman, wherever you need me, coach, I'm there, right? So if he was playing though pitcher, sometimes he found his way all the way in the outfield running after baseball. So it was a lot of fun, watching Carter grew up. And, as he grew up, he played on, different teams within the local Little League here. So shout out to North Rialto Little League, where he got his start, playing baseball. And another shout out to Mrs. Strong, who seen something in his little body posture at 2.5, 3 years old, and said, give him a chance. You never know, what he will be capable of doing, and he can fall in love with this game. And if there's anything that I can do as a president of this organization, I know he may be younger than most people, but he can hit a ball. So give him the opportunity. So, I credit, her from, allowing him to play. And then his very first coach, is a dear friend of ours, Big Mike Clark. We appreciate him for coaching him through his very first baseball t-ball experience. Him and his beautiful wife, Nairi, have been very instrumental in that, in that aspect. But Carter then became, um, I would say, a force to reckon with. We started to see something in Carter. Um, it was in, not in just the way he moved and the way he ran, but just in his eyes, how much he really cared for the game, how he studied the game. Carter never watched cartoons. I mean, I would try to get him to watch cartoons. I would turn them on, but he refused to watch them. He would rather sit down and watch a football game or a basketball game, excuse me, with his dad, and or a baseball game, and he was just studying the game. He became a student of the game, and I think that that is important for athletes to understand, is that it's one thing of playing the game, but it's another thing of really knowing the game and understanding why things happen in the way that they actually happen, on a field and off the field, and what that looks like. And so Carter kind of built this thing where he became someone who worked out on his own. He would call his Uncle Miles. I'll never forget. He would call him and be like, "Uncle Miles, we got to work out. Are you busy? What's going on?" And he would be working, and he would be like, "Can we work out?" And my brother would try to figure out, okay, well, how could I make this happen for him? Or he would send him workouts to do. And so Carter really, really was focused on, how do I get better each day? How do I get better? How do I get stronger? How do I perfect this game that I love? And so at one point we transitioned from Little League to travel ball. And that's a transition. If you know baseball, it's different. And we started, going on the travel ball circuit. And my God, the friendships and the family and the relationships that we've built over the years with so many people is like lifelong family members. Like, we will never forget all of the incredible friendships and relationships and family that we have within the travel ball world. It's so crazy to think back, like there was so many different kids. And Carter now is going into his junior year of high school, and a lot of his friends are already graduating um from high school. And so it's crazy to see. So I've recently been looking back at like all of his friends that are now graduating, and I'm like, oh my God, like this is just crazy to see all these young men, grown up now, and doing their thing. And so um I just smile. But Carter, like, definitely a special kid. Definitely someone who loves to win, hates to lose, but knows it's part of the process. Um, as we entered the travel ball circuit, I mean, there were a lot of learnings. We were on a few different teams where he, learned from some incredible coaching staff along his journey, from Coach Abel to Coach Gill, and Coach Ernie. I mean, he's had some incredible coaches, to Coach Rudy. I mean, like, am so, I wouldn't just say because me and my husband, we are so grateful for the people who took the time to not only see our son in a way that sometimes he didn't see himself, because Carter was also looked at as like almost like an underdog at one point as well, because Carter was super short. He was so small. The doctor was like, he's only going to be about 5'9", 5'10". And I remember my stepdad saying, yeah, right. I don't think so. Do you see his mama? His mama's 5'5", almost 5'6", right? His daddy's 6 feet. His grandpa's tall. Like, I don't think so. His grandma's tall, so, and I knew, I'm like, no, I don't think so. I don't know. But God knows. So, with that being said, there were times where maybe he didn't get to play, a position because he wasn't a power hitter, and or he didn't, or be on the field because someone else was maybe a little bit stronger and better in that position or whatnot. But what we seen in Carter's eyes was it fueled him to just be better. And I think there were many times that Bernard and I would look at Carter and tell him, it doesn't matter the size that you are. What's in your heart and what you give should be 100% every single time you step out onto the field. Know that you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. Know that God has already given you all these gifts, talents, and abilities to be able to be the best version of Carter when you go out there. You can't be nobody else. Don't try to do too much. Keep things simple and get 1% better. And that's what we've always instilled in him. But I think one of the things that I want to make sure that I express during this episode is that we also were big and still are focused on for him is his education. Education comes first. Okay. Getting good grades. If your grades ain't right, you ain't playing. Okay. And that's been from since a young age. Um, we made the decision as a family, even when we had people telling us that it was not a good idea, to put him in a school that we thought would be a benefit to him, and it absolutely was at the time. Um, it was, I believe, his sixth grade year. Right out of his sixth grade year, we decided to put him into a school called EM Speed and Training. Um, no, I'm not getting paid to talk about the school, but I think that that was a great move that we made for our son. Some people may beg to differ, and say, well, you put them there, and the learning was a little bit different. They worked out all the time. They were focused on fundamentals and all of those things. And yes, it to me and to my husband, that was the best move that we could have made. And what I want people to understand, and as parents, you're going to make decisions sometimes, and they're going to be um, the best decisions, and sometimes they may not be the best decisions. But we lead with what God is telling us to do. And so in that moment, we did what God was telling us to do, not what other people was telling us to do. Because I think what people need to understand is that when you're making decisions for your kids, you have to drown out the noise from the other people who are trying to tell you how to raise your kid when you're the one actually raising your child. So I think quickly we had to, drown out the negativity and the noise around why we put our son somewhere and focus on, what could be the outcome for him. We're going to do the best thing that we can for our son in this moment. And whatever the situation is or whatever happens from this, we will pivot if we need to and be able to get him the things that he actually needs. And so, um we made that decision and put him there, and it was definitely a great move for us in that moment. And then came the time where we had to decide on where he was going to go to high school. And believe it or not, things have changed over these years, and in terms of deciding on where your kid's going to go to high school. And so I remember a conversation my husband and I were having about, putting him in high school and what does that look like. And I'm like, I can't believe we're having a conversation on where should our son go to school, right? But we knew that we wanted to make sure we put him in a school to where he was going to be pushed. His education was going to be top priority. It wasn't going to be made easy for him, because what people need to understand is that life ain't easy. And so, I need to make sure that my son is getting the best education, but also not just getting passed by. Because sometimes when you're in, certain situations or larger classrooms, and I can't speak for everybody, this is just my own story, is that certain kids could be just getting passed through. But are they truly learning? What are they getting out of the lesson to help them in life. Okay. Now, life lessons are going to be taught by experiences that they're going to go through out of high school, but they're also going to be instilled in the home. So, not only are you going to be learning at school, but my job and my husband's job as a parent is to teach him to be a young man at home. It is nobody else's responsibility to teach my son how to be a young black man. My husband's job. It's my husband's job, right? But when it comes to his education, when he goes to school, he's going to learn his education from his teachers, right? But he's also going to learn a piece of education for life skills from us, but um I say all that to say that when it comes to making decisions for your children, number one, pray about it first, and number two, talk to your kid as well to see where their mental is at. My best friend always talks about, check in on your kids' mental. It's important. Not only are we dealing with stuff, but they dealing with stuff too. Since the pandemic, it's shifted things for a lot of children and adults, right? And so checking in on their mental and how they're feeling and how they're doing is so important. And so we decided to, as a family, to enroll him in a high school at Aquinas High School in San Bernardino. Um, and for us, again, it was the best decision. Being coached by, for us, one of the best coaches that does not give up on Carter and also pushes Carter, but he's also on Carter. And my husband always says, I don't need anybody to just listen and do whatever Carter wants him to do. I need somebody to be on Carter's butt. I need somebody to push Carter. I need somebody to tell Carter when Carter's doing things wrong. And so, we made that decision, and, he just completed his sophomore year there. And, here we are, the summer of, going into his junior year. And, he's made some transitions. He's no longer little Carter, as everybody used to say. I know now when people get to see him from the old travel ball community, when they're at high school games now, like, oh my God, Carter, I can't believe you're so big. I mean, he's about 6'1", and just a handsome young man. It's my boy. And I could say that because that's my son, right? But anyway, like he's just an all around great kid. I couldn't ask for a better little brother, a better big brother to chase, and someone who he's like my little spirit animal. Like he's just like he's so me when I was in high school. Like all of the things that he does, he kind of replicates some of the things. I was a little bit more wild than he was, but needless to say, he's such a great kid. And again, while I did this episode, is that I really wanted to talk about, just how special and how proud we are to be the parents of Carter Hadnot. I I cannot express just how we feel about the direction in which his life has gone. Carter lives a very different life than some children or teenagers, I would say. He practices a lot. Carter has a batting cage, and that's a blessing, right? Not every child does, but my husband was blessed to be able to, put something like that together for him when he was 7 years old, and he still uses that same batting cage 10 years later. And he practices and he works out every morning at 4:30 in the morning with the incredible, coach T, from, Lab 909. Shout out to him, who's been very instrumental in you know um him getting stronger, and all of those things. And I'm grateful for our village of family that's around us, from his grandparents to his aunties to his uncles, to me and my husband, to his sister, to little Chase who's screaming at the fence for him at the games. And, most of you know Chase is on the spectrum, but his brother is his entire world. Chase thrives off of the things that he sees Carter does. And Chase is Carter's best friend. And Carter will do anything to make sure that Chase smiles, and Chase knows that he's there, and vice versa. So their relationship is absolutely beautiful. But our village has been absolutely amazing. The support from people throughout Carter's entire baseball career so far has been just simply amazing, and we can't thank you enough. And so, while I'm doing this episode of the podcast, going into his junior year, I look forward to, obviously, touching base, by his senior year and following up and letting you guys know where his journey has taken him. He plans on going to college and playing ball. If he's blessed with the opportunity to take it to the next level in the majors, or the minors and then the majors, it's all written. It's all in God's plan. And what I need him to know is that, make sure you stay solid and rooted in your faith, because that is what's going to get you there, is making sure that you don't forget, who's brought you through this process. It's not about mommy and daddy. We're just here, and we were the vessels to be able to give you the opportunities to be able to, play the game that you love so much. And for parents that, might be watching this and, saying, what do I what do I do, to help my child, who maybe is, having a hard time, with playing baseball right now. Maybe they're, not hitting as well. Carter's been there. He knows what that's like. But what we talk about in this house and we share with him a lot of times is that you're going to fail. Baseball is hard. It's a game of failure. You're going to fall 20 times before you get back up, and maybe get back in your groove. So just remember that, you can still do this. You just have to keep putting in that maximum effort, when those times do arise and when those times do get tough, for you. And so, never allow them to just give up on themselves. I think one thing we also, and Bernard would agree with me on this, is that we continue to pour into Carter as many times, as much as possible. And sometimes we'll get resistance from Carter. He's a teenager, right? He's like, yeah, right. Y'all don't know, yeah, mom, what, dad, whatever, but we continue to pour in him, whether I'm telling him something or his dad is sending him a video. We try to get him um, as much info and as much, positive things, poured into him as we can. Um, these teenagers got enough negative influence in the world, right? Whether that be peer pressure from friends, girls, and all of that stuff. I'm not going to use this time to talk about that, but Carter knows, how I feel about those things. But, it's just, you just got to try to keep them focused on where they're trying to go with this special gift that they have. What is the final destination, right? But also knowing that, take things one day at a time and allow God to order your steps. Okay? And that's just it. I pray for Carter when he comes, when he goes. Currently, he's traveling right now with an amazing travel ball team, the MLB Breakthrough Boys, who we are blessed that they are a part of our son's life. They are a developmental team, who works on everything, from his defense to his offense to his mental health. But also, these young boys are there establishing relationships with each other, right? Learning each other, supporting each other, encouraging each other, that teamwork, that bond, which is, important in uplifting, one another. Most of the players on the team are African American. So it's definitely a lot of lifting each other up and encouraging each other. So we're grateful for that opportunity for him. He travels for about 6 weeks, and then he comes back home, roughly in July, beginning of July, and then he takes some time off to, as I say, or he would say, is be a kid again, and see his friends and hang out and do all those things, and then he's back to the grind again. So I just wanted to, shed some light on, what it's like for my husband and I, to raise, a child that is, you know, extremely talented, and ranked, in different capacities, as far as where he's at, with his skill level. But I do want to say this before I, end the episode. I'm going to leave it with about two things. The first thing is I try to tell my son is that, you may look at rankings and think that they're everything, but at the end of the day, it's just continue to put in work. That's a number that they've given you, but don't forget who you are. Your character speaks value. Who you are as a person through and through, don't forget that. At the end of the day, you are Carter Hadnot, and you just happen to play baseball, and you are good at it. But don't forget that your mind is powerful. The education that you receive, no one can take away from you. And so just don't forget who you are. Coaches love to see leadership, your character of who you are, and how you show up every day is more important than the game. And so just make sure that, your child leads with integrity and resilience, and also grit and leadership. And make sure that, it's not one of those things that completely consumes the mind, because it can very, very quickly. There's times where, our son deals with some heavy, heavy things as a 17-year-old boy. And so pay attention to when things are going on. Make sure people in your village tap in with them and check in. His auntie checks in with them all the time. His uncles check in with them. I got friends that check in with them. Check in. Make sure they're doing okay. And my final thought before I end this episode, because there will be a follow-up to this, with his dad, and then also I want to bring him in so he can talk about his own experiences and his own perspective of how he actually feels as the athlete doing all this work. Okay, it's one thing for me and my husband to talk about the journey, but he's the one living it, so it's going to be obviously a lot different. But I will say this, this episode is dedicated to you, Carter. From mommy to you, I just want you to know, baby boy, just how proud I am of you, and just how special you are to all of us. Whether you, as people say, make it or not, you will still be Carter Hadnot. You will still be special. You will still be an incredible human being, and you will still be our son. And so I love you with every fiber of my being. I know that God has his hand on you each and every day, because I'm praying for that. Don't ever forget who you are and what you have been called to do, because you are truly living in your purpose. I love you, son. I thank you, Grow family, for listening to this episode of the You Grow Gurl podcast. I hope that this week you have an incredible week. And if you are a parent of an athlete, just remind yourself and remind your kids too that you love them during their ups and their downs, so that way they know that no matter what happens, that you got their back. All they need to hear is, especially during a bad game, is they don't want to hear you tell them what they did wrong. Yeah, that conversation can come later. They need for you to fill their cup. They already know what they've done wrong or how they've made a mistake. They don't need you to add fuel to the fire. So just remember to lift them up, but also give yourselves a pat on the back for how far you've helped them come. You all take care. Carter, mommy loves you, Pookie. And I know you're probably like, Mama, why you say that? But you'll always be my Pookie, but you my dog. Y'all take care, and y'all have a good rest of your week. Love y'all.